A man-made disaster, a moral indictment, a failure of humanity itself. Those were the words of the United Nations chief as a UN-backed panel confirmed what so many have been warning for months. Famine is underway in Gaza, imposed by Israeli restrictions on food and aid and enabled by the United States. Now, these horrific images are impossible to ignore. And believe it or not, some try to actually explain it away, blaming so-called, quote, pre-existing condition. But Israel's years-long blockade started long before October 7th. In fact, it was a deliberate policy to starve the people of Gaza. Meanwhile, just 2 days before famine was declared, the Washington Post reported Trump's State Department had fired Shahed Qureshi, its top press officer on Israel and Palestinian affairs, with no explanation. His firing came after recent disputes over statements about Gaza. One statement condemned the forced displacement of Palestinians in Gaza City. Another mourned the targeted killing of journalists by Israeli forces. Both were blocked by the Trump administration. And who broke the news first? Laura Loomer, of course. She called Qureshi, quote, a jihadi and rabidly anti-Trump staffer. Joining us now is Shahed Qureshi himself. Shahed, thank you so much for joining the show. First, your firing, I have to say, did not have many politicians up in arms, and a lot of the media did not jump on this story right away. I'm curious to get your thoughts on why you think that is. Why do you think it's not garnered national attention? And do you think if you were fired over anything else or other policies outside of Gaza, more people, more media would have been outraged?
It's a good question. Look, right now, there's so many pieces of news that from the Trump administration that are controversial or horrible, and especially from the State Department itself, and especially in Gaza. However, most of the attention right now is with D.C. and the news cycle right now. However, I'm hopeful that over time this will change, especially in the case of Gaza, because there's so many news outlets that are covering it outside of the U.S.
Shahed, I worked at the State Department and have a sense of the extensive clearance process that can go into these types of materials. So can you talk about how language that a State Department colleague of yours described to me as similar to what Trump himself had used, how it became such a lightning rod and led to you being fired?
Look, what was so surprising was that these words have precedent. On Sunday, for example, saying that we shared condolences with journalists we've said it before. On Monday, saying that we do not support forced displacement. This is something that Special Envoy Witkoff has said. This is something that President Trump has said in the spring. And we said similar things from the State Department in March as well. Now, in this specific case, I had 2 weeks of clearances backing this up, but it was interesting that senior officials from Embassy Jerusalem were frustrated after 3 days of my drafts, and I think that it's a concern that they're taking the lead now moving forward. And what does that mean for policy? Because language often is policy.
Can you give us a little bit more insight, though, on what the internal conversations looked like, what people were saying to you, and your impression of sort of where the feedback or the pressure was coming from?
Sure. So I can give a quick timeline. It was over 3 days. It was Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, August 10th, 11th, and 12th. August 10th was the killing of Anas, where I drafted the condolences. I was told quickly that we don't have any information, and therefore we can't share condolences. And it was interesting because by Tuesday, which was the day of the daily press briefing, right? Because on Sunday it was just a one-off question from a reporter, and so I was told no response. And then by Tuesday, we were told as a building that we're going to defer to Israel here because they believe that Anas was Hamas. We've been deferring to Israel, and I was told to defer to Israel too often. It doesn't allow us to put U.S. interests first. Now, on Monday, I received a question from the AP, another one-off. It was about the reporting that Israel's planning to send Palestinians in Gaza to South Sudan. Now, this has come up a number of times. A couple of weeks ago, it was Ethiopia, Indonesia. Back in spring, it was Libya. And we've said similar things about being against forced displacement. And this time around, it went up, which is rare, but the spokesperson went up, from my understanding, to the 7th floor, and that line was cut. Now, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, those are daily press briefing days. We have packets of press guidance. We brief the spokesperson before they go on the podium. And I had a question that was maybe like a week old, but it was still there just in case, about Speaker Johnson's visit to the settlements. Now, Embassy Jerusalem had not looked at those lines before, because the press officers there would defer to the senior floor, and they don't always take a look. So it was the first time taking a look at it. Immediately cuts it out, puts Judea and Samaria in there, and commends Speaker Johnson's visit. I, with backing of other colleagues, did cut those lines because even Secretary Rubio and President Trump doesn't commonly say it, but Ambassador Huckabee does. Now, by firing me, I'm worried that they're going to have a lead on those talking points, and that wall is not going to be there anymore.
Well, so now is Ambassador Huckabee really running point on American policy in Israel? Where is Secretary Rubio in all of this? Because from some reports I've heard, sources are saying that he is spending most of his time at the White House, and it really, there is somewhat of a power vacuum at stake.
It's true. The senior officials, like the Washington Post had reported, like David Milstein and Ambassador Huckabee, are taking a lead here. And by firing me, it does have a chilling effect for my replacement and for other press officers that the Embassy Jerusalem has the lead on language around Israel, not in just immediate vicinity, but in the region as a whole. So next time someone wants to draft lines, they're going to recall what happened to me, especially as someone who was as well established as I was since I had been there. You don't get the Israeli-Palestinian Affairs press officer position without having good standing in the NEA Bureau and Near Eastern Affairs Bureau in general. So it did really send a chilling effect, I think, in the building.
Can I just go back to a point that you said about the Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who is, avowed evangelical, a lot of controversial views about Israel and Palestine, as you said, doesn't even consider the Palestinian territories occupied, which seems very counter to the fact that the United States has stood by a two-state solution for decades. It seems we're getting further and further away from that. Do you believe that Mike Huckabee is now in charge of the United States' policy? I mean, you also said that they're deferring to Embassy Jerusalem, but also to the Israeli government for their comments on some of the things that they're doing there. Have we basically outsourced this to Mike Huckabee and the Israeli government?
Absolutely. That's what it feels like. That's what I noticed. And even when my colleagues at the State Department had concerns, it was a difficult to navigate around that push, and it's especially going to be difficult after my firing. Now, keep in mind, like President Trump himself, if you recall, acknowledged these one-off acknowledgments, right? Obviously, the policy is what matters more, but language is important. He acknowledged that people that don't accept that there are people starving in Gaza are nuts and cold-hearted, right? And so Ambassador Huckabee doesn't speak like that. So what it feels like within the building is that the real political activists are coming from the senior level, like Ambassador Huckabee and his team from Embassy Jerusalem. So that is really going to be concerning moving forward, because they're even going beyond President Trump's words, and words often become policy, and it's extremely callous at this point.
Speaking of activists associated with this administration, can I ask you for your response to Laura Loomer's remarks about you, and what her sort of association, her power over people employed in federal agencies and doing important work across our federal government right now, sort of her ability to help pull the plug on people's employment in what seems like a moment's notice. What's your response to what she said about you? And what do you think of the power Laura Loomer seems to have over the federal government right now?
Look, It was obviously unhinged. I've been someone who's followed U.S. foreign policy, and especially in the Middle East, since middle school. So I've lived through the war on terror language and what that meant. So calling someone a jihadist to me sounded very like a 2004 attack. However, I'm more concerned about what that means for other Muslim Americans moving forward who want to enter government, what that means for them, and when they see those type of attacks. Because one would think, oh, we lived past that era, but it's circling back with a vengeance. And within the State Department itself, it was like a nervous joke almost, like, oh, don't get Loomered or don't be Loomered. So people within the building are very aware of this, about this all the time. It's an awareness that affects your work and causes an unnecessary stress, in addition to the rifts. And
Does she have spies at the State Department? Is that how this works?
I can't tell you. I don't know exactly what happened and how she put that tweet out about me. It was interesting because I don't know this for sure, but the timing of the Washington Post piece, I imagine, because there was a comment in there from the State Department that when they go to the State Department for comment, must have tipped them off, and who knows, maybe they told her, or maybe she was already planning on doing this. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But I imagine that having that many political appointees, I had a good relationship with the political appointees and the civil servants and the Foreign Service alike. But who knows? I can't speak for all the political appointees and who's in the building and is aware of my existence there.
Well, Shahid, that tracks with my reporting. Your colleagues spoke very highly of your abilities as a subject matter expert and briefing. So any organization sounds like they'd be lucky to have you.